Mike, what time of day is it?
Yeah, seriously, it's so well lit.
Was that sun?
Me, it's sun. It's because you're seeing me in daylight for the first time.
Because we're recording so early.
Because we're so early, yeah.
I didn't know you existed during the day.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I kind of don't. It's fine.
Why does your room look different? It's like, because it's not night.
That's right.
I just assumed you lived in some kind of Ninja Turtles subterranean lair, so it doesn't even matter what time of day we do it.
This whole time I thought you were a vampire.
Yeah.
I did say this before we started recording, but my light's not working, which means I have this, like, I won't focus. Well, my hair is being keyed out because the reflection of the green, and I have this ray of light because of the time that we're recording.
Well of Souls.
I do like it, though.
I was going to say, you want me to do the proper...
Yes, please.
Thank you.
It's really hard from this
Very
angle.
good.
That's like my favorite music cue in the entire, even with the theme and everything. Just that, it's like a warm blanket just wraps me around. Like,
I know we've talked about it, but I just can't resist the mention of, I love the little cameo of that in Last Crusade when they're in the...
What's that?
What is that?
Covenant.
Yeah. You sure?
Pretty
sure. You know why he's pretty sure? Because John Williams is saying, that's it. That's the one. He said it.
Austin, I told you I was going to ask you about this. I'm going to ask you about this.
What?
You did a thing in person in front
Can we talk about that?
No.
Can we talk about that?
I had a concert. It was
he
so
tweeted
exciting.
about it, so I hope we can talk about it.
It was very top secret.
Yeah. How did it go? What was the process? I mean, I assume this is your first one that you've done.
Every time I send a tweet, I think I'm sending it to just you guys, and so I'm always like, who are these other responders?
Old man doesn't know how to use Twitter, thinks he's Google searching, but actually it's on his Twitter timeline.
It's funny till you do it.
One time I
Penis
similarly
and larger, right, guys?
I've tweeted, hey, can you follow me so I can DM you? Just publicly, instead of adding the person I was trying to say that to.
No.
Not my finest work on that one.
Love it.
And then you pen it.
But yeah, Austin, what was the process for that happening again? And like, I just kind of want to know, like, that's again, I assume you've not done any yet.
No, you are not wrong. That it was the last.
Yeah, take it off, baby.
I know it's hot today. The last. This subject makes me a little flush. The concert was the last concert was PAX East doing the Supergiant thing with Darren in whatever it was PAX East last year, like late February or early March, I guess.
I think it was March.
And then after that, the last event period was when we were all at DICE, and so. This was the first. I've done one recording session in person. I did fly to Nashville in January for a day for some recording sessions, which are obviously very controlled and very, small numbers of people. And so that was very different. And there's no audience, obviously, and there's no like guests in the booth like there might otherwise be. This was, so there's a conductor friend of mine who I've known for years, and he's been a big supporter. He's conducted Journey in particular a bunch. And he texted me a few months ago and just said, hey, this orchestra that I work with in Indiana is going to close out their season with a show they're calling Fantasy Night, which will feature like Harry Potter and Star Wars and stuff. And he said, I'd love to do Journey on the show. And if you would love to come out for it, you can conduct if you like. If you're kind of, this was a few months ago. So he said, we can kind of gauge it as it gets closer, but if on paper that sounds appealing, I can get the wheels in motion. And he said, look, as you might imagine, budgets aren't exactly great for orchestras right now. We're not swimming in cash given the complete lack of sales for the last year. But I was like, I don't care. We'll work out whatever, actually the way we did it, funny enough, is the local university is doing hybrid in-person and online. So they had me come and do a master class, and basically the fee that fee was what paid for me to have my expenses covered thing. Cause the orchestra just blatantly was like, it's basically bring your own music at concerts.
Wow.
And, but it was amazing because, they were capped at 25%, audience size, and so
What does that mean people-wise in a space like that?
It was about 500. It was a 2,000 seat hall.
Okay.
And
It's not nothing. That's cool.
Yeah, but so
It's
even
not
now they
nothing.
can't actually sell out even if they wanted to.
well,
Sure.
yeah, they sold out their 25%
Got it,
cap, and they also did do a simultaneous live stream. But yeah, I was amazed that I thought it was going to feel a little depressing because 25% standing up in front of an audience that's
it
a
looks
quarter
empty.
full. Yeah, but because they did the seating so that people could kind of like be in their little bubbles, so that there was still distancing. It wasn't like the front 25% and then a sea of empty, the way it would normally be when you have utterly failed to sell out a show. Which, believe me,
I've played
I have
those
done.
shows before.
Me too. I have.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for coming.
Yep. It is so. It's awkward until you just lean into it and you just tell the audience, all right, you know what? You guys are here. So this is truly and especially for you. And they end up having a good time, or one hopes, but this audience, because they were sprinkled throughout the hall to do the social distancing, it didn't feel nearly as empty as the numbers would suggest. And it was so cathartic. I said, I can't remember if I actually said this when I was talking to the audience or not, but in my mind, I certainly was thinking, I don't even need any of you here. It's just so cathartic to stand up in front of a proper orchestra again. And funny enough, apropos subjects for this crowd, because I was going all this way, I thought, I'm always thrilled to do Journey. We do kind of the main bits, Nascence, Apotheosis. I was born for this. And it was all well and good. I was thrilled to do it. And the orchestra played it great. We had a phenomenal singer for the song. But I was like, I went shopping, as I sometimes do, on the rest of the program, and said, what else is on this show that I can conduct, that I can just kind of steal from the other conductor. And they were doing the theme to The Mandalorian. So I said, I'm doing that one too, just to let you know.
That's awesome.
And so
You conducted that. That's awesome.
So I was able to do the Mandalorian as part of it as well.
It's a good.
That's a fun bit, I imagine.
Is that you
Easy
conducting,
like that?
Mike? You just
That's
sort
how
of
I
do
do
this,
it.
and then the Mandalorian theme happens.
A lot of finger pointing. That's how I direct.
So Austin, I
think we're
assume
gonna
that
have to make that happen.
you accepted the very poor fee because you just really wanted to go conduct.
Oh yeah, there was no fee. This was expenses.
Yeah.
It was. I want to stand up in front of a crowd because here's the reality, and I did tell this to the audience. They seemed very happy to be at an event, so they were a very generous audience, very applaudy, but I turned to them and I said, I want you all to give yourselves a big round of applause because I've been basically sitting on pins and needles for the last year, worried that this art was going to die because this is an art that tends to live very hand to mouth. Orchestras, with very few exceptions, orchestras don't, you got up to 70, 80 people's salaries. You've got crews. You have expensive venues that require insurance policies that are that are very elaborate. I mean, that are non-trivial.
The opposite of the thing that you're trying to say.
It is a logistic pain in the ass of an art form, and it is one that has always been relative to the arena shows of the pop stars of the world and the big rock bands and hip hop legends and all the various folks that dominate like 10,000 person arenas.
You sound super cool right now.
Like this is a far more niche thing, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
And so it requires an engaged audience, which also is often inclusive in that is like a donor base and corporate sponsors and all that. So when you have an economic pause or contraction like we saw, it's not an industry that's designed to weather the storm. It's just, a lot of orchestras just fold. They're like, we can't go 3 months without a show, never mind a year. And
it's kind of habit breaking as well, right? Like if people stop going, they forget to go. It's like,
and not just that. I think that's very true. But the thing that had me most worried was for the last year, I've been reading tweets and seeing posts on Instagram and whatnot of people saying, every time I look at like a photo of a old party of mine from 10 years ago, I feel anxiety just seeing a group that packed in together. And I think that there's
I'm still there. I'm still there for sure. Like,
I think it's a kind of understandable collective trauma. And so I thought people are going to be slow to want to go back to these concerts, even if there's no barrier anymore, even if, it's like everyone's vaccinated, the virus is just omnisciently, we just know it's dead. Like, create an unnaturally confident situation. There's still going to be a reticence, I think, from people who are like, I don't know, I've gotten kind of used to not being surrounded by crowds, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. And like, I had a funny moment with one of the musicians where in the rehearsal, he did an amazing solo, and I went down to give him a handshake, and he instinctively gave me back an elbow. So I gave him an elbow, and he replied with a hand, and we both looked at each other and go, we don't know how to interact with humans. We've forgotten. So anyway, I told the audience, look, it means a lot to me that you guys came, because someone has to. And if they don't, and you were the ones who took up that mantle of responsibility and had the kind of courage, I think, to say, you know what? Probably I would imagine most people in the audience had been vaccinated, but even if they hadn't, there's a certain amount of courage required to just say, I care enough about this art form to know that, like, life will never be fully risk-free, and I want to do this. I want to support my local musicians and my local community and businesses and that sort of thing. And I said, look, to me, it's not a small deal that you showed up for this concert. It is an actual act of will that you've had a year of encouragement to not do. I'm not chastising that. You've had very good reason to not do this for a year.
Yeah.
But just know, from me, it is such a tear-jerking sight to see bodies in seats, knowing that they could have done anything else with that evening. So from that angle, it was a spectacular experience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pam just shot a wedding, and it was probably the most unique. It's not even a wedding; it was an event. It was a multi-day thing in Joshua Tree, and it was basically like Burning Man light. I mean, there were art installations. You walked in, there was they had 8 medics. There was.
What were they planning?
Right?
That's a statement of intent if ever I've heard one.
I know. A wedding.
I mean, obviously, we've got to have
requires...
medics for the wedding, obviously.
How many?
Obviously,
8, definitely.
8.
At least
7 wouldn't cut it. Like, it's going to be.
No.
I love the idea that there were only 10. There were only 10
You're living
guests.
fast and loose, Tom. You want to have 8?
2 medics
7?
per
Oh my
guest.
God! What happens if one person
exactly.
dies? So they had like a.
It was actually a medic. There were 2 medics who were getting
2
married.
medics for the
in
medics.
fairness. Yeah.
But you arrived and there was a testing center, and you immediately were rapid tested, and then upon receiving your verification of negative COVID test, they would give you a choice of one of 3 bands that you would wear around your wrist for the remainder of the weekend. Color-coded green, yellow, or red. Green meant bring it on. Give me hugs, give me kisses, whatever you want.
Oh, that's a really
Yellow,
interesting idea.
Yeah, yellow, of course, meant just ask me but first, or red, of course, was like, I'm not comfortable yet. So everybody knew you didn't have to go, you don't have that awkward, weird elbow hand.
Reminds me of traffic light parties when I was a student. Yeah.
What's that?
Do you ever go
They
to
were
any of those?
adjacent to the LAN parties.
We don't
that he
need to go
did.
into it. It was a similar structure of instruction, but with slightly different meanings.
But the reason, like,
I've
make
never
out
heard
with
that
me,
term.
the
traffic light party, honestly, Austin, at this point, like, it's fine. We're old now. We don't do that kind of thing anymore. It's fine.
the thing that it encourages me though
Just
is
stepped in
that
something I'm going to be Googling while Troy tells his story.
100%.
the level of anxiety, and I've experienced the same thing where it's like, man, are we ever going to go back to normal? Because I'm a very affable extrovert.
Oh, Mike,
I'm a very physical. Mike's gone.
He's
Very
back.
physical
It's
person.
fine. It's fine. This camera seems to get laggy after like.
Can't handle ambient
Troy.
light. That's the problem.
It can't do it. It's
Yeah.
too much. It's too much data.
need to
It was the traffic lights were specifically.
I see what you're up to now. I got the Urban Dictionary
Got the
going
Googles
here.
going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, Troy,
Yeah,
do you
sorry,
mean
go
that
ahead.
your kind of social interaction, like you are more satisfied with it if it's physical?
I am 100%. Like if you look at the love languages and stuff, I'm physical touch
Gotcha.
and words of affirmation, and so that's been a very interesting thing for me to navigate because if I'm around you and I'm comfortable with you and we have a rapport, I like to touch your shoulder. I'm a touch person. This has been an interesting way for me to grow and go, what's a different way that I can now communicate? I think I've talked to you guys about this before. When we went to lockdown, I was like, how am I going to expand my mind? And so I've been doing French. I've been learning French. There's not an advertisement for it, but Duolingo, it's a great app.
It is
Been
very
doing it for, as of today, 315 days.
Nice.
And and that's straight. So I haven't stopped for almost a year. And it's because I want to be able to communicate in a different way. I want to keep my brain sharp. I want to be able to do that. And so learning how to communicate, not only just like linguistically, but also what's a different way that I can communicate? Because PAMS is not necessarily physical touch. PAMS is going to be acts of service. So in order to be with my person, I got to be able to speak her language. But the thing that encourages me about that is how quickly we can invent a system that says we don't want to go back, but we understand that things are different now, so how do we acclimate? And if we weren't able to adapt, we wouldn't be here as a species. It's the one thing that we inherently do very well, sometimes to a fault. Sometimes
like aggressively and dangerously often, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like we'll go, I remember one scientist was talking about rising gas prices, and he was specifically someone who was a climatologist, and he was like, I hope that this isn't the reason why people buy a hybrid, because the second that gas prices go down, people will go back. It can't be reactive, it has to be proactive, and in order to do that, there must be an understanding that this is the way that we need to operate better. But I'm encouraged by you being able to do that. I think that people, I'll share one last anecdote, but I gave up meat. I went fish only for like 5 years. And then I went to a nutritionist, and I think we talked about this before. There's a whole book you can read about eating your blood type or whatever. And it was like, oh, by the way, your specific blood type, it's harder for your body to process protein from these other sources. This is where your body naturally wants to get it from. I was like, oh, okay, because I was trying to gain weight and I couldn't. And so I was like, I'm going to slowly introduce meat.
I have the same problem.
Me too.
All the time.
So I finally was like, okay, I'm going to slowly introduce meat back into my diet, and I was going to have steak for the first time in like 5 years. And I literally was like, I was hesitant to do it because I was like, I haven't had this, and I had this weird fear. And then I tasted it, and it was delicious, and I love it. I think that what we'll all have to do is just kind of go find someone that you're comfortable with, and go someone outside of your pod, someone outside of your immediate circle, and go, can you just give me a big hug? Can we be close together, and then slowly do that?
I'm gonna try that at Ralph's.
You should. It's like, hi, I don't know you.
Walk down to McDonald's, make some friends.
I mean, because I had spent so much of last year like completely alone, like, in a studio apartment. Like I went 3 weeks without making eye contact with anyone at one point. Like
healthy,
it was a lot. And then I did a live show where everyone was tested, and we did a charity COVID relief thing. And I did ask a friend for a hug. And it was just weird. Like I was just so aware of how strange the custom of hugging is, rather than being like, wow, this is great. I was like, this is a weird thing that we do. Why?
Kissing is weird, man. Let's put our mouths together. It's a weird thing.
I mean, Troy, you're going to be able to relate, like, stage kissing ruins kissing. The second you've kissed someone where it's purely because a script tells you to do it, and you realize the horribleness of that experience without underlying feelings.
I can make it even more awkward. Infamous Second Son. There was a specific scene, depending upon which way you went, where Fetch and Delson, in the script, it said violently make out. That was in the script, violently make out. Now, at this time, Travis and Laura were married. Travis played Reggie, my older brother. Laura played Fetch. So, here's Travis on set, and he's doing his damnedest to make it even more awkward. Now, Laura Bailey is like,
of course, that's his role in that process. Yeah.
There's a curtain, and he would just peek his head out, and he would just point at us awkwardly. But Laura and I love Laura like a sister. Like she is in every way. She is a sister.
Loving someone like a sister definitely adds to the appeal of making out.
She and I
love how this just has everything going for it to be.
It's a red. This whole
thing sounds terrible.
I've got the band. It was hard. Like I've had to do a lot of really uncomfortable scenes, and Laura were like, "All right, you ready to do this? Let's do this. Okay, here we go." And they were like, "Well, we've got these face cams, so we can't do that." And we're like, "Oh yeah, totally." So first, what we want to do is you're going to have to mime it.
Oh my
which
God.
is even so you're awkwardly doing this.
You're doing
for
it
the purpose
Demolition
of
Man
camera.
style.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Demolition Man. Yeah.
They actually exchange. I was a really good kisser. And then you go, we're going to take the helmets off and you guys are going to do it for real. And it's still just.
What my headcanon of this story is they're like, I see them all looking at the monitors and they're like, this chemistry, we should up the ante on this scene. This shouldn't be a makeout scene. Like, and I could just see them rewriting the script to just raise the heat.
No.
I look at Laura Bailey
not
as
good.
such a mum. Like, I think I've only met her once, but of
She's the
everything
best
that I know
auntie
of
in the
her,
entire
she's
world.
just so much of just like this caring, kind, warm woman
Yep.
that I feel like if someone were like, "No, you have to make out with her," I'd be like, I can't do that to her. She's gonna read me a book before I go to sleep or something." Like, it would be
Either that
very
or
difficult.
for those that I think there's a lot of folks that she became consciously aware of her, even though they've probably played a million games that she was in without knowing it was her. Obviously, The Last of Us is probably the thing that made them go. So then there's the other side. It's like, I'm scared of this girl.
And here comes the fan art.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, shit. Here we did it to ourselves.
In fairness, I wasn't even thinking that way until you said it, and now it's all I can think about. So.
Sorry.
do what you will, internet. But back to the topic at hand and not to making out with Laura Bailey. You're right, Mike.
I'm back. It's going to happen occasionally. I don't know what's
right.
going on, but it's fine.
I'm fully vaccinated and I've been out a couple of times. And for me, I feel like I was locked down to a pretty significant extreme. Like, I wasn't going to Ralph's. I was like not going anywhere at all. I didn't go to any restaurants in the last year. So when
You're like asthmatic and stuff. I mean, you're
right, I've had pneumonia multiple times and been
You had
hospitalized with it
very
before.
good reason to be very.
It would have been a pneumonia is awful. It's so awful.
I don't think I've ever had it. You have to. You have to sleep on your. You can't sleep on your back.
Try sleeping at all. You have to. I have to, like, if I've ever had it, and again, every time you get it, your lungs get worse, so you're more likely to get more sick the next time you get it. It
Is that
effectively
true?
Scars your lungs. Yeah, they're like, the more you get pneumonia, the worse this is for you in the long run. And the fact that I've had it 3 times, they're like, it's probably what's going to kill you when you're old. Like, cool, great.
Is it also a thing
God
where
doesn't want you to exist, is what
Feels that way a lot.
feedback that
it's
you're getting.
Australia? This is what you do. Is like everything's just trying to actively kill you.
None of
I have a
that,
question.
just the pneumonia.
Is pneumonia? It's not a disease. It's a condition, right? Like you develop pneumonia. You don't catch pneumonia. Is that correct?
It can be contagious. Certain kinds of it can be, but yes, it is generally developed off of like another cold. So you get sick with something else, and then you get pneumonia, which is how it works in relation to COVID. But yeah, I mean, sleeping on it is like awful, because imagine that you just constantly have like a swimming pool in your lungs. Like, every breath you feel liquid move up and down. So it's like, it would be like having water in your mouth and trying to go to sleep, but it's in your chest. You can hear it. It like rumbles. Like, it's just awful. You have to cough every minute, like, terrible. So if I ever need to sleep on pneumonia, which makes it extra debilitating, is I have to like take a lot of drugs to knock me out so I can actually go to sleep. And then the waking hours are just this awful, painful. Anyway, so I hadn't been anywhere just to negate that risk of not getting pneumonia again and being hospitalized.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure how I'd feel I've been to 2 restaurants. One of them was like an open outdoor thing. The other one was not. I was completely fine. Like, I was like, oh, I'm immediately not at all concerned. I think I was like, I was just amazed by how quickly I reverted to, this is fine. And nobody else seemed to be concerned, other than the just strange experience of wait staff having to wear masks and PPE
Full
and all
suit
that
of armor.
stuff. Yeah, which like just made me, I was like, okay, we're tipping these people more for what they're doing in this process. Like, they may not be vaccinated. Some people have had to work through this too. So but I was just immediately fine. And I recognized that I think there was a study that came out, I believe it was from the UK, that was linked to like anyone with any kind of anxiety disorder, like any kind, is going to have a really, really tough time. With just trying to accept going back out into the world like things are normal again, and going to see an orchestra or something for them that, like you said, Austin, is probably going to be a lot more difficult than it ever was before, and the potential economic risks of that were like explicitly mentioned, and I have no idea, what is going to happen or how quickly people are going to feel comfortable, if ever. But yeah, for me, I was amazed that I was just like, I feel completely normal, and I went from a very extreme, like, especially like walking outside and being, if I ever needed to go outside, being furious if someone wasn't wearing a mask. So I was like, you could murder me. And I know that you could, and I hate you for it. But then again, yeah, being vaccinated was just like, fine. I'm fine. Mentally completely okay.
We're all
That's
collectively,
genuinely
I guess.
brilliant news. That's good.
I certainly agree. We're all basically Tom Hanks at the end of Castaway.
We have ice in our glass.
Coming. We have ice in our glass.
I wish I'd lost that much weight.
Did you know that when they were making that movie, they shot the first half and then they took
it took like a year off, right?
So he could lose the weight and grow his beard and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And so Zemeckis made the Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer movie, What Lies Beneath, during the hiatus in the middle of the Castaway shoot. They went and made an entire other movie.
Wow.
While waiting for Tom Hanks to like safely come down this super low,
They want to
scraggly.
Matt Damon that shit, right?
It was so annoying that from that point on, he just did mocap films.
I mean, there's been
That was
a
the last
few.
time he filmed like live action.
No, he did that movie Flight with Denzel Washington.
That's true.
He did.
I've forgotten that.
He
The
did.
bridge.
But there was a big period there where it was
Oh yeah,
all
no, of course, yeah, and it still
weird
dominates.
mocaps. Yeah.
Polar
He
Express.
did Polar, and then what else?
Polar
Beowulf.
Express. He did the Christmas Carol movie with Jim Carrey.
Beowulf.
He did
with Angelina.
Beowulf, of course. Yeah, Beowulf.
Wait. Who was he in Beowulf?
What? We're talking about Zemeckis.
Zemeckis. We're talking
He
about
was the
director.
director.
I
wasn't
thought you were
in
talking about Tom Hanks. I was like,
Oh,
what?
no.
No, Bob Zemeckis
No, he's
was
definitely
like,
been-
this is the future. Like, this is the way.
But it did coincide with having to just do a really awkward film, and you do wonder like how much that was. He's like.
Did you guys see his
on
Welcome to
computer from now
Marwan movie? The like action figure
not seen
movie
it.
with
Heard
Steve
about it.
Carell?
It's Carell, right?
Yeah. I haven't seen it
No, I'm
either,
not
and I
seen it.
consider myself a huge fan of his, but somehow I still haven't seen it. It seemed like it came and went. He's made so many of the best films of all time that
Oh, for sure.
He created tech for mocap. Like the camera system that is still used was because of Bob Zemeckis. He's a fucking genius.
Technical visionary. Yeah. I
mean,
up there with like
Yeah,
Lucas
George Lucas.
or
Yeah, so I feel like his whole foray into what can I bring this medium forward. I think he was trying to build on the shoulders of the giants of special effects and everything that he had done with like Back to the Future. And it was like, I made a car fly, I made a skateboard hover. Can I do this?
not just that,
for
one
real?
that always gets forgotten. I remember watching a behind the scene with Bob Hoskins, where he
Oh
goes,
my God!
yeah, right.
I
He goes,
put him back. I mean, that is a technical feat.
that film
it's
holds
mind
up.
blowing when you actually stop and think about what's going on in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is what we're talking about. I'm just saying that for the audience.
There's a
haven't
scene
seen
that
yeah.
the behind the scenes where
You've never
Hoskins-
seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh man,
Oh, you should. It's lovely. You should. It's a
In the
really
call,
nice film.
in the call right now. Go watch that movie.
This is reaction. Who
Pause.
framed Roger Rabbit? I don't.
When I
I
come
know
back in
that-
a year, I'll have lost 2 stone. We'll carry on the podcast from there.
And I know that Bob Hoskins, by the way, looked at it as like, I'm going to be known for the fucking movie with the rabbit. Jesus Christ. Because he was such an accomplished musician, accomplished actor. But if that's the only thing you know him for, it's still
oh yeah.
that
Well, the thing
opening
that-
shot, the story that they tell, mise en scène with no dialogue. You know exactly who Eddie is. Oh my God.
The thing that blew
Also,
me away.
the licensing deals behind
Jesus
that movie, the
Christ.
legalities of it was the fortnight of its day.
It was.
It's a fascinating thing.
I'd forgotten about that
the
aspect.
the one that I've seen pointed out that everyone always forgets is how many awesome special effects are in Bubba Shrimp,
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah,
Like there's so much pioneering,
Adding him to
all
all the stock footage and
compositional
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, that was massive back then. That was
the
again
specific
groundbreaking.
I wanted
remember
to say
when I
I'm
was-
looking at pictures of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I don't know how else to phrase this other than this looks really cool, which feels like the most millennial thing to say about, oh, they made a live action film.
Doesn't do it justice. Doesn't do it justice. You have to watch it.
This
Christopher
is
Lloyd.
the book. So this is the book by the guy who did the animation for that film, which everyone should own.
Yeah.
It's basically like a cheat sheet for all animation
Poses.
stuff. It's
Very
incredible.
cool.
Every guy in the theater was like, I will have sex with Jessica Rabbit. I will have sex.
That's she's the
angles,
part of
Troy,
it
but
that
I
I'm
love
the
you.
most aware of. Like, I've definitely seen that a lot.
If you want to double
Dress
down
is
though,
iconic.
Cool World pushed that notion, was like, do you really? Because if you haven't seen Cool World with Brad Pitt and Gabriel Byrne, oh my, and Kim Basinger, that movie.
Wow.
Jesus.
That was that
There's
was
your second dose
Troy
of fan
needs a
art.
moment.
Thank you,
no
everyone.
kidding.
Yeah, dude.
There was a behind the scenes with Bob Hoskins in that movie where he was talking about how he did a take where he goes and he's strangling Roger Rabbit, and they yell cut, and they say, Bob, we're going to need you to do that again. And when you strangle the rabbit, please do this with your fingers and don't strangle him like this. Strangle him like this. Because if you do this, it costs the production an extra $100,000 because we got to paint the rabbit in between your fingers on every frame.
Wow.
And so please strangle the rabbit like this.
Seriously, watch
The
that
way I
film,
grew up,
Alanah.
though, we strangled our rabbits like this. We don't do it like this. You can't strangle a rabbit. Trust me, I know. You have to do it like this. This really gets them.
The thing that people don't realize
all
about that
about
film is how
believable
much
techniques.
puppeteering is in it. Because you've got like whenever the characters are holding physical objects,
Oh my
'cause they don't
God.
have CG, they have to puppeteer the objects. So they
Whoa.
would build these sets on like 2 feet high. 2 meters high. So puppeteers underneath are like moving a mug, puppeteering a mug that they can then animate an animated character walking around holding the
But they
mug.
still have to
You
do
got to
that
watch this
frame
Alanah,
by
and
frame.
remember-
How much did
Watch
this
the
movie cost
it's
to make?
amazing.
Dude, it had to be
It was
super
ridiculous.
expensive. It won Oscars, didn't it?
Yeah, but it was
Surely,
also
like,
pioneering in terms of like its business model. Like it was produced in different countries. So I believe I'm right in saying that. Yeah, because Richard Williams, who wrote this book, who everyone should read, is he was kind of I think he's credited as like the animation director. So he was the guy who basically took the shots, did all the animation on top with the team. But he was doing that in the UK, so it was one of those very early films which had like a transatlantic production process.
Really?
Nowadays we think nothing of like 8 studios around the world working on the same movie. I mean, God knows how many
Ubisoft.
people worked on like Avengers Endgame or Ubisoft or whatever. But back then, like outsourcing, literally there was no internet, so they were literally like having to transport materials back and forth over the ocean. Like it's crazy.
It's interesting.
When I
There
heard
are
about
also
the process of
two
this-
directors.
Let me
Fun
give you-
anecdote.
Let me give you your answer, Troy.
Everyone's
It
like,
won-
yes, Mike, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
It won 3 Oscars.
Yeah.
Best visual effects, best sound design, best sound editing, best film editing. Also nominated for best sound, best art direction, best cinematography, and Mike, Richard Williams won a special achievement Oscar that was a one-off for that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
For animation direction and creation of cartoon characters, a special achievement Oscar to Richard Williams.
It
No, he's a
got
genius, and like so much of his stuff as well has informed like modern animation. Like is built on the shoulders of this guy. Like it's crazy how much stuff
Like
he
Stan
codified,
Winston.
yeah.
Squash and Stretch and all that. Like these things existed. Obviously, like Disney animators have been doing them for years, but this was the guy who literally wrote the textbook that is now used by every animator in the world to kind of codify a lot of these systems. And yes, the technical wizardry of like doing that in 3-dimensional space. Again, perspective. Just a character like turning around and moving through a 3-dimensional space, done literally as 2D cell animation. It's incredible.
So Richard
It's
Williams, would
mind-blowing.
he have also been on set as the animation director while...
I assume he'd have to be
Right?
just to make sure that like the mug was being held in the right
Yeah.
place that they could use the shot. I assume it would have to be phenomenal. The best one when you watch Alanah, because you should.
I will.
Oh my
It's
God.
old.
The best moment. There is a moment where a character. I'm not gonna spoil it. There's a moment where Bob's washing some dishes. And
Oh
everyone
my
in
God.
Austin and Troy gonna know the scene, right? Incredibly technically, like you're going to be trying to figure out how it works.
yeah,
But one of the best moments in that is there's a character threatens him with a gun, and if you look to the side of the shot, you can see the shadow of the gun on a stick where it's being puppeteered. Because of course they didn't have roto out the shadow on the wall or paint in, or they didn't bother to paint in the shadow. So you have this character walking in with a gun. The gun is a practical 3-dimensional object in the space being puppeted on a stick, and then obviously they've animated a character holding it. You've got this film's incredible.
Sounds so complicated.
It's ridiculous, and you have to just keep in your brain reminding yourself computers don't exist. Just repeat that to yourself as you're watching it. Like, sorry, apologies, computers existed, but computer animation doesn't exist.
Didn't do that. Yeah.
All of this is being done by
painters,
just an
basically.
Incredible team of artists.
And
Only 50 million, by the way.
150 million?
No, 50.
50 million? Yeah, but for that time, that was a huge budget film.
IMDb says 70 million for the record.
Wikipedia disagrees.
I know.
IMDb says that Thomas Was Alone cost $2 million, so we're not going to trust IMDb.
I think IMDb says I'm a millionaire. It's not.
IMDb it's weird how high budget movies always are underestimated, so they look maximally profitable, and low budget indies trying to flex always have high estimated budgets. So yes, you're right. Basically, don't trust any numbers on IMDb.
The thing that I remember from when that movie came out was 89. Is that right? Is that when that movie came out?
88.
88. Not bad, guys.
It's a whole year, Troy.
A lot of the marketing,
pick it up.
Unacceptable.
A lot of the marketing
work, Troy.
was, look at this technical feat, look what they're doing. And it wasn't even about, here's the story. It wasn't about anything other than, is like, you're not going to believe, you're going to, and like entertainment
Avatar was I feel sold similarly, right? Like Avatar was all about
I think it was more about the secrecy of what James Cameron's been, what he's been working on for the last 10 years. But this was, you're going to go back to the theater for a cartoon, even if you're an adult. And people are like, what? And they were like, we're just going to show you a little bit. And one of it was, in the taxi, when they're like, this is a cartoon, but it's the practical world. And the conceit of the movie is people in the real world reacting or interacting with this cartoon world. And it was just, the conceit of it was brilliant. Everything about that movie.
Well, that's also all that we're
And then
mentioning.
when you watch it as an adult and realize that it's actually like a metaphor for like America and race, essentially. Like you watch that movie again, you're like, oh, there were layers to this that I missed as a kid.
I was going to ask you, we're also only talking about the technical side of it. Is it also a good movie? Is it a good story?
Yeah.
fantastic.
It's a classic film noir detective story, but just where half the cast are cartoon characters.
Wow.
You're going to love it. I'm genuinely excited, Alanah, for you to watch this.
I didn't know about it.
Such a good time with it.
Mike,
it's crazy.
It's what Zemeckis did. It's like on the back of the Back to the Future success. It was like, now let's do this.
Oh, was that his Inception, his do whatever the hell you want movie, was it? Was that
Back to the Future was the first one. I think the first.
He had done.
I'm saying was this his
point.
cashing in his check basically was his project, right?
I don't think because I think 3 came out in 91. Back to the Future 3 came out in, I think, 91, but Back to the Future 1 and 2 would probably come out at this point because Back to the Future 1 was 85. And I think part 2 was either 87 or 87.
That would track. I think 2 and 3 that was the first time where a sequel and a third movie were filmed, I think, simultaneously.
Right? And it said to be continued. And he was like, I got to do another one. And so they said yes. And then it said to be concluded at the end. And it was the first time I remember they showed what happens. I mean, James Bond movies did this all the time. Is like James Bond will return in, and they knew they were going to do something else, but they actually showed parts of 3 at the end of part 2.
And
because they filmed them, so he would have finished those. We're working out like the scheduling of a movie in the late 80s. So he would have then been able to move on to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he would have had a couple of years of
according to this, it was
post-production.
Back to the Future 85, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit 88, and then 89, 90 of the 2 subsequent Back to the Future
89, 90.
films.
Okay.
So this was sandwiched in the middle of the trilogy.
Damn.
But you're right. This is the cashing of the check. This is you made all the money with Back to the Future. What's your dream project? And because you only get to cash that check a couple of times in your career.
This is Jaws. Okay, you do your Alien movie now.
Yeah.
Now do Close Encounters.
Yeah.
With Richard Dreyfuss.
I love the story you were telling about seeing the shadow of the puppeteering rig. I love those little trivia. I remember when they were remastering in '97 the Star Wars films, and they were like obviously changing and updating and doing a lot of controversial tweaks to the special effects. One of the things they were doing was going back and fixing things like that were in there. And there was one that I always thought was funny that I'd never spotted as a kid. but I've got my my VHS of the original trilogy, and it's absolutely there. And that was one of those things they got rid of, was during the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back. There's that iconic shot of the POV of the snowspeeder where it goes in between the legs of one of the AT-ATs and then takes a few shots at the other one, flies over top the second one. So it does this kind of, arcing maneuver. And it was one of those where they basically just rigged the camera to fly through the thing, and then they superimposed the image of a cockpit, because what you realize when you look at it is that the shadow of the AT-AT is in front of the cockpit image in the shot in the original film. No one clocked it because it's sort of like dark on a slightly different shade of dark, but it was one of those where they were going through and they were painting in the cockpit to like actually make it believable. That was one of the, like, I was watching a documentary back then of things that they were changing, and it, because it wasn't all just adding monsters and stuff. Some of it was things like this. You can see the shadow of the puppet rig because we had no way to get rid of it. Well, now we want to get rid of it. And I don't begrudge them that, but it's still cool. I like the little.
It's super cool.
I like the little telltale signs of the techniques.
Then does that translate to doing the viability and validity of doing a remake, like we talked about last week?
Boom! Ongoing narrative. We've serialized the
Shit.
show. Yes.
What do you mean?
I was
going
to say I think that's what you mean. Does that diminish or improve?
Or is the charm
validate?
in the preservation of look what they couldn't do, which makes something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit all of us like, look what they did do.
I think you're okay.
What's the
as long as
greatest
the
magic
original
trick you
is
ever
not
saw,
erased.
right?
Like, as long as the original thing is not erased, then we're all right with a remake.
Yeah.
But this is talking about the original thing was erased. It was like, we can get this.
Well, Star Wars is a very atypical example. I always thought it was very strange that they made such a concerted effort to bury pre-existing versions, because it's also very. Everyone would always accuse them of doing everything as a cash grab, but I'm like, the ultimate cash grab would be to offer all the versions.
Yeah.
Like it's clearly done out of a kind of neurotic auteur sensibility of, I need my work to be perfect and I don't want anybody to touch the imperfect predecessor versions.
Which you
I've
can
always
still
found
get.
that
It's
odd.
just hard.
Oh,
Yeah, and there's
yeah,
not-
but
sorry,
it's like all but like you got to meet a guy out of a van.
Pretty much.
Yeah, they've gone way
Well,
out of their
the
way.
great thing there is where people have done the despecialized editions, right? Which obviously I've never seen because that would be piracy. But I've heard.
Tail.
I heard tale.
The word on
But
the
that's
street.
people have literally
recesses
like
of the sleaziest of establishments.
amazing visual effects people have gone back and basically added all the flaws back in, and it's incredible, I would assume, because it's the closest you get to what that film was back in the day, and that's incredibly interesting to me. The amount of work someone will now do to add back in those little errors and glitches and get it right, and what that does to the movie.
I
My
also feel
favorite
like
was-
this is a little bit less of a remake, Troy, and a bit more of a patch.
Right.
That's
Ooh.
interesting.
It's
yeah.
just films being patched. They're broken on launch. You could see the shadow of the puppeteer with the gun. I can't believe it released this way, and then 20 years later they fix it.
Okay, so what
Well,
about
that's the exciting thing about creative but technical mediums is everything's broken.
What about
every
4K
game you ever
Blu-ray?
played is broken? Every movie. There's bits in Avengers where like armor is clipping on
Yeah.
Thanos' chest, and one day someone might want to fix that, but like it doesn't matter. If you push against that wall, you're gonna create errors, and that's exciting to me. Like that's the stuff that fascinates me in game development, is like faking stuff and like breaking things in a way that just about works is the joy of the work.
So what about like 4K Blu-ray and now restored to its, you're able to watch it in a higher resolution than you've ever been able to see. Is that for a film? Is that?
That's an update. That's your PS5 update.
Well, it depends if it's a transfer, because what people always forget is that film is 4K. It's actually higher than 4K. When you see it.
It's an analog, so there's no 4K is a digital translation.
Exactly,
of film.
yeah. So you're not so a lot of like film transfers, seeing a 4K is actually technically more accurate to the filmmaker's original intent because they would have edited on film and blah blah blah. But the stuff that's fascinating to me is color grading. Like, have you seen all the controversy around The Matrix recently? Because the Matrix was like basically color corrected wrong for the DVD and VHS and Blu-ray version that we've all seen. So that heavy green tint, wasn't in the movie in the cinema version.
No way.
It's
wait.
We all
hold on a second, because I remember
not to the extent.
The Wachowskis were talking specifically that they wanted especially the real world to have that, not the real world, but the Matrix world to have a green tint to it.
It does. So the art direction of the environment, so there's like green on the walls, there's green in the costumes, there's green. But what they did in the sequels was they really because it was that time after Oh Brother Where Art Thou, where everyone was really going all in on the color correction. With the sequels to the Matrix, everything is cranked up to 11. Like they're very vividly green. But when you look at the DVD transfer and later the Blu-ray transfer, they basically went back and color corrected the first movie to kind of mirror the aesthetics of the sequels.
Interesting.
The very ramped up color correction. And apparently now the version that's just coming out now in 4K, which looks so much better because it's not been like post-processed and you don't got all the kind of glitches that have come with that, is much more kind of quote-unquote naturalistic in terms of like skin tones and stuff. So it's a completely different take. So that's an interesting one where the image in our head of how the Matrix looks, because we've all seen the DVD and the Blu-ray and all of that stuff, is wrong to what the original cinema release of that film was. I'm sure the Wachowskis were happy with the DVD. I'm sure they oversaw it, but like it isn't accurate to what the original release was. So now the version that's the update, the remaster, the remake, whatever, is actually more correct than what we've seen as the intermediary stage. Can't think of an example of that happening in games where like a port has become like the de facto version and got something wrong.
I feel like
it's interesting.
This isn't the parallel, but the closest I can think of is like a lot of Switch ports end up having more content. That's not super uncommon, and that's the closest.
And that becomes the definitive version of the game.
Like
right?
you got to play it on the Switch, which I think it's the overlap between industries where this stuff is concerned is really interesting, and that I wonder if, you know, people in the video game community can be very critical of any of this kind of stuff. I wonder if that exists for people who are making podcasts just about film, where they're like, well, you updated it, or like the DVD is incorrect. Like,
I guarantee you the only reason I know about the Matrix thing is like 50 YouTube videos happened about it.
There were people that wanted to ban.
It's a massive. I'll share with you.
People were
super interesting.
Wanted to make Ted Turner a pariah for colorizing It's a Wonderful Life, and how dare you're destroying the authenticity and the integrity of the original. It's supposed to be black and white. He's like, but I want to show you what it would have looked like today. I was thinking about Peter Jackson did the World War I documentary They Shall Not Grow Old. If you haven't seen it, it's truly fascinating, and I feel it's a little long because once you get it. But what he did was he he got the film, and of course they ran like 15 frames typically, or somewhere around there. Was it even
it's erratic, like with silent movies. It was hand cranked. It's not like a consistent so that's why everything looks always very stop starty in old.
And so he brought it to 60 frames, enhanced it, colorized it, added VO and effects, and was able to actually go and go, what are they saying? And they were able to transcribe and then record. And so
they hired lip readers to do it, right? They hired lip readers to like go through the footage and work out what was being said. So they could have voice actors do it. It's weird to watch because it looks like it was filmed yesterday on an iPhone. And you're like, that's... The weird one for me is how awful everyone's teeth are. That's the one that really jumps out at you, right? Like, you're like... Because you don't notice it, like, but when it's like all super sharp, you're like, wow, dentistry's come a long way.
As a British person, that's saying something.
I was gonna make that.
I know, right? Like for you, it would be a step beyond.
I actually had an out of character moment because I had that line in the chamber, and then I was like, nah, that's a little bit.
I did that too. I did think about if I should say it or not.
Stiletto. She was like, she came up to him prison style in the shower and just went, hey.
Not that I hesitated. I was like, maybe I shouldn't.
At least in the UK, everyone can go to the dentist. But
that's fair.
You don't want to talk about it.
And those were his dying words.
Not to get political.
Out in the shower.
Not to get socialist.
I don't know if you've heard of
all right, Andy
socialized medicine.
To me, is that an example of now you're able to see it the way that it was, it could have been, and you now have a new appreciation for it, or is it no? We want that to be erratic, hand cranked. We want to see what it looked like then. To me, this mentality is transcendent. It is unilateral. It speaks so much about us sociologically. Do we want this is the preserve our culture, or do we change our past? Do we realize that these were the mistakes that we made, and we realize that they are a part of our history so that we can understand it and move forward? Or do we go, we need to tear down statues? To me, they're part of the same conversation.
I think also
both
art
have value.
preservation is a really interesting one. Is do we let this decay and fall apart, or do we fix it now and change it? And I have no idea where I land on that.
Yeah, but the last time we did this, we were chopping off penises and covering up boobies. You know what I mean? Like the Catholic Church went through and did the Great Emasculation. That's where the fig leaves came from. Artists weren't going, you know what we should do is put fig leaves. They went through, and after the paint was done, they put them on, or they lopped off body parts because they all just randomly decided that was blasphemous, even though clearly the Bible never teaches that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into that thing where we need to be able to say, maybe this is obscene and maybe this was considered profane. We no longer do it, but we need to recognize that this was what it was. I don't think we should go destroying shit.
There were episodes of a show recently that were something Tina Fey was involved in, but I don't know which show. Where there were
30 Rock, you're thinking of, where they removed some episodes.
Yeah, they chose to remove some episodes, and I guess like my thought process on that. I mean, there's also been the Dr. Seuss stuff. Is generally if that's what the creator of that thing wants to do, that's up to them. I think
Disney Plus right now try to go through and find an original Disney classic. They bury them like Dumbo, buried. That you can get them. But you got to look, and then there will be some stuff that has a preamble, a prologue to it, going, we're preserving it, but we're letting you know that this has some stuff that is culturally insensitive.
See, for me,
that's a good thing, right?
For me,
providing that context is really useful.
I think context is fine, but don't go changing and like let's redub the crows and change their dialogue.
It's the same.
You have to do a lot to make Dumbo okay by modern standards.
Do you really? I've not seen it since I was a kid.
They did this to Tom and Jerry. They did this to Tom.
One of the birds is literally called Jim Crow.
Yeah, that's not great.
But
the vocal performance is exactly what you imagine.
Yeah, but that's where because it is a relic of its era, I find it all the more important to preserve it teaches you about like look what was acceptable then. Like we've come a long way, and I think that I don't see what's gained, especially if you put that sort of warning up front that says just so you know this hasn't aged particularly well. But I find it. I think that makes sense.
Like, I think that's a good way of handling it. I really do.
I think I agree.
And I think also the statue thing. I know statues. It's a more heightened deal, but like. I think a lot of those statues belong in history, in museums, as a way of talking about the past.
I agree with that. I say get rid of the statues, put them somewhere else.
The crucial thing with a lot of the kinds of statues that that are being discussed in this way, were not contemporarily built. They weren't put up in the time of the event. They were put up with a very specific purpose by
100 years
racists in a lot of cases, right? Like they were symbolic of the time they were put up. More so, arguably, than the people that they were commemorating. It was the context there. So that's really interesting to have that conversation, and I think but it doesn't belong in a park. I don't want to walk past that every day, and
venerated.
Museums are a great place of kind of talking about those things.
Demolition Man Museum. The Hall, what was it called? The Hall of Violence or whatever, where you could go in through. It's like, where can I get a gun?
I love how in that museum all the guns are like loaded and working. That was my favorite detail of that scene.
It's a very silly movie.
Yeah, because they think that no one's going to go for it.
Simon, what was his name?
It's so good.
Simon Freeze? Simon...
I just watched it too, and I'm blanking.
Simon Says...
What I love about that movie is it's of the same...
Didn't we talk about this recently in an episode? Because I also said... I also just watched
Simon Phoenix.
Simon Phoenix.
I've watched it recently. I've watched it for the first time during lockdown.
Simon Phoenix and John Spartan.
Demolition Man.
John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for a violation
of the verbal
morality
we have to go
code.
with it. It's fine.
I think
art changes over time, contexts. Reevaluate old words.
And then we just talk about Demolition Man over and over and over
And then
again.
we talk
And
about
the Pizza Hut Taco Bell thing. See, that ties into exactly what we're talking about.
I can always funnel it into either Demolition Man or Time Cop. Guarantee you. Ron Silver just showed up in West Wing, and I'm like, no. You're Senator or President McComb, depending upon the timeline, and it's just freaking me out.
For anyone who doesn't know, with Demolition Man, I feel like this is pretty well known.
1985.
In the US version, the only restaurant to survive the franchise wars is Taco Bell. In Australia and I think most
Hungry
of
Jake.
Europe.
It's Pizza Hut
Pizza
in the UK.
Yeah. Because
Pizza
we don't
Hut.
have Taco Bell. So I
Wait,
think
he's on camera, though, when he says that. I'd like to take you to Taco Bell.
yeah, it's all edited around and dubbed. The
all
only
edited around,
thing
yeah.
that they didn't manage to do was when they actually walk into the restaurant, there's a Taco Bell sign that's like on the glass. That stayed.
And the food, of course, is not pizza.
Right.
But yeah. Same's true. What they actually then because I think that Demolition Man was one of the first cases of that being done, and then was it
do you know
Scooby-Doo?
why? Was it for legal
where
reason,
Scooby-Doo
or-
has different scenes?
Did you not have Taco
Or just
Bell?
because it was
Anachronistic.
We don't have
Taco
Taco Bell still doesn't exist in the
Yeah,
UK.
we
I think one Taco Bell just opened in London
might
or
be the same in
something. Like they're
Australia.
finally trying to come over.
Subsequently, there was
Yeah.
a dysentery outbreak.
It's like there's
What were you going to say about Scooby-Doo?
So Scooby-Doo has separately recorded scenes for different regions, which promote foods, like basically different sponsors. So there's
Scooby
actually
snacks.
like different. It's the stuff Troy says, like the on-camera speech or the sign in the background. They literally like shot alts of certain scenes for that movie.
Wow.
For different, because I think they had like a different. I can't remember. I feel like they had like a McDonald's deal in the US and a Burger King deal in the UK or something like that. So they had like full-on different scenes.
I mean, the Australian
it's an
version.
interesting, weird moment in
The Australian version of the original South Park game is
Which one?
different. Sorry, I shouldn't have said the original.
Stick of Truth.
The Stick of Truth is different in Australia because any kind of
That makes me feel very old that that's the original.
yeah,
I remember
sorry,
the old N64
the
ones.
original
Yeah,
of the
it's
new
fine.
ones. It would be like saying the original Doom
Yeah.
when I mean Doom 93. That's my fault. But the Stick of Truth,
The original PlayStation, the PS4.
the PS4.
Yes.
Rich
Because
kid.
any kind of interactive sexual violence is not allowed in video games in Australia. There's the ideas of censorship in video games in Australia, I think, is generally overinflated. Like, people ask me about it so much that I'm like, this is
The
not
Australian version's always watered down.
super common. Well, it's not all the time. So you're not allowed to have incentivized drug use for drugs that have real world names. You can't hurt children. I think that's the case pretty much everywhere, though. And you can't have any, like I said, interactive sexual violence, which I feel like I'm all right with. So
Those are great things. I think that's a good way to look at a dev and go, hey, listen.
Great things to remove, Troy. You mean there, right? Just to confirm the comments. Those
remove
great
those.
things
Those
to
are all
I
remove.
think those things are
good
fine.
things.
Just do you a favor,
Why
there,
isn't
Troy. It's
Troy
fine.
on the podcast anymore?
Yeah, I think Australia's.
And here comes Greg Miller. God damn it.
I think the sexual violence one, I people disagree with, especially in that case, because it was controversial to take something out of a South Park game. But my stance is, I'm okay with not having sexual
What was
assault.
the sexual violence that they're referring
You have
to?
to
in
press
that?
a button to, unconsensually anal probe a Randy. Then that's a whole bit, is that you are the one who is effectively sexually assaulting Randy.
But so, I mean, that's the kind of thing they put in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I
I
go to
don't
the
remember.
doctor,
I'm trying to picture. I played.
Well, you're
that game. I'm
consenting
trying
to the doctor
picture the
doing it.
scene that.
It's on the spaceship.
You're a consenting party.
In the Australian
Oh,
version,
right,
the thing
right.
worth noting is that I think what they did is funnier.
Intent is-
The Australian version gives you this picture of a koala crying with like a didgeridoo playing in the background and some eucalyptus, and it's this really condescending text that's like, "Oh, Australia, we had to censor this because whatever." So every time that you would press that button to do that, it just gives you this crying koala, and I was like, I think this is infinitely funnier than what
That
you
is
were
pretty
actually having
hilarious.
this
players
is,
do.
by the way, this is a Family
we
Guy
get that
episode,
with,
100%. But this is literally a Family Guy episode where they talk about, he has to go get a prostate exam and the recontextualization of it. We had to completely change in Shadow of War, or Shadow of Mordor, actually, for the Japanese version. There's no beheading allowed. So that's like, well, that's kind of what you do. You chop off the heads of orcs. And they're like, nope, not here.
Wow.
In Germany, they changed the poster for Uncharted because the gun was there. You're not allowed to point the gun at the audience,
At the camera.
at the camera. So they had to move a gun off to the
Any
side.
kind of Nazi imagery and
There was,
games
yeah, I
and
was going to
things.
say, I was having a conversation just the other day about how the original BioShock, in the audio logs, there's reference to, I think, Tenenbaum learning science in Auschwitz. And the German censors made the line get changed to like a prison camp or something generic. Even though she's like clearly like a Jewish, victim of the Holocaust, and it's extremely contextually specific that like Rapture is born out of the the after effects of that scientifically. They were like, nope.
It's probably just that
which is
the
fair
laws
enough.
are so specific in terms of needing to omit that kind of thing that context can't.
We have a
matter.
silly
It's too
one
complicated.
here. We have a silly one here where there's certain elements of government that can't, but you can't show. I'm going to get this wrong. You can't show.
Why is Mike not on the podcast anymore? Whisked
You
away.
can't.
by...
You can't show basically you can't show footage of MPs in Westminster in the context of a comedy program.
Wow.
So whenever like last week tonight,
Like, I was
or
going to say,
Daily
John
Show or
Oliver always
something,
has to do this.
yeah.
That's so good.
Whenever there's footage in an American like satirical comedy show about this happening, and they rebroadcast it here, they always have like a bit of like to camera, and John Oliver will often like sing a song or something like to fill the space basically where he's like the Americans. I think one time they just played fart sounds on John Oliver for like 3 minutes.
It's a ridiculous show.
Because
gosh.
there's stuff like that in the UK has some weird laws.
That is a very odd one though. I mean, that's a weirdly defensive posture.
Well, we have some strange governmental setup in this country. So yeah,
I have to go.
Me too. I just looked at
Immediately.
those like,
Yeah, I
I'm
was
going
like,
to call
oh
in
my.
a minute.
Me too.
we went on a journey.
Hi everyone, welcome
We
to
went
Play
on a
Watch Listen.
journey.
I'm Alan Pearce. I'm a video game
Oh,
writer.
shit.
That's Trebek. He's a video game actor. That's Mike Biffle. He's a video game director, and that's Austin Winter. He's a video game composer. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.